Good day, everyone. Today we'll be discussing about Hildegard Elizabeth Peplau and her contribution in nursing practice. But first, let me introduce myself and my group mates. I am Joanna May Ignacio, and my group mates are Paul Justin Idio, Nicole Garcia, and Ernesto Galicia. So before we begin with our discussion, ipipresent po muna namin ang aming intermission number.
Então menina se prepara, primeiro toma Jack, depois leite na sua cara. Piranha
Essa amiga deu, sua prima deu, perdeu maior foda, bebê possível.
Baby, you raise my head so high.
Clones, mujeres y ron. De aquí salimos de día, nos fuimos a lo loco. Todo el mundo a guayar reggaetón.
So today we will be focusing on the theory about relationship. So when we are talking about relationship, guys, this relationship in the hospital, di ba? Sino ang may pinakamalapit na relationship with the patient?
Nurse.
Yes, nurses. Madalas nurses ang mga kasama ng mga pasyente. So, dapat maganda yung relationship natin sa mga pasyente. So, when we say interpersonal, interpersons, dalawa. At least dalawa, talk about paano tayong mag-establish ng magandang relationship with patient. And the mother of interpersonal theory, guys, is Hildegard Peplau. She developed the interpersonal relation. Well, alam niyo dati, even in Nightingale's time, hindi naman nabibigyan ng pansin yung relationship with patient. Kasi the rationale in nursing before, I mean yung logic behind the care for patient, is you only have to help the patient to recover. Pero hindi yung aspeto ng ating relationship with patient. At si Hildegard Peplau, ang unang nagbigay ng emphasis on how important our relationship with patient. So now to fully understand what this relation I was talking about and who is Hildegard Peplau, may I call Paul Justin to discuss to us first who is Hildegard Peplau.
In September 1, 1909, in Pennsylvania, she was considered to be the mother of physiatric nursing. She's emphasized the importance of personal and self-recognition through introduced the concept of advanced nursing. Significant contributions of development of theory of interpersonal relation between the nurse and the patients. In 1931, graduated from Pennsylvania School of Nursing, and 1943, Bachelor of Degree in Interpersonal Physiology. He earned Master and Doctorate degree from Teacher College and Columbia University. Published book. In her interpersonal relationship, Dr. Peplau emphasized the nursing and client relationship, holding that this relationship was the foundation of nursing practices. Her book, Interpersonal Relation in Nursing, was complete in 1948. Publication took 4 additional years, mainly because Peplau has author and scholarly work without a co-authoring physician, which was unheard from nursing in 1950s. At that time, her research and emphasized the give and take of nurse and client relation was seen by many revolutionary. For example, as the nurse listened to her client and she's developed the general inspiration of the client situation. Parang example ganito. kukuha siya parang kakausapin niya yung client niya kung ano ba yung nararamdaman or what. Parang kukuha siyang information sa client niya, tapos ibibigay niya kung ano yung mga data na nakuha niya dun sa client niya na nagpapa-assist sa kanya. Next reporter.
Nicole.
So, ayan po. Refers to the body of verified knowledge found within the Peplau's theory of interpersonal relations, integrated existing theories into her model at a time when nursing theory development is relatively new. The nature of science in nursing, discipline of nursing that is mainly knowledge from the biological and behavioral sciences. In developing her theory, she borrowed knowledge from behavioral science that can be termed the physiological model. It enabled the nurse to begin to move away from meaning events, feelings, and behaviors could be explored and incorporated into nursing interventions. Sa pagbuo daw po ng theory niya, humiram po siya ng kaalaman mula sa agham ng pag-uugali na maaaring tawaging modelong psikolohikal. Binibigyang daan nito ang nurse na magsimulang lumayo mula sa isang kahulugan ng mga kaganapan, damdamin at pag-uugali na mayroon. Tuklasin at isama sa mga intervention sa pag-aalaga. So sa behavioral science theory na pinaghiraman niya ng knowledge, nagko-combines po ito ng elements of physiological, sociological, and anthropology to provide a scientific basis for understanding employee behavior. It examines why employees are motivated by specific factors such as social needs, complex, and self-actualization. In physiological model, a theory in physiological to predict outcomes and explain specific physiological processes. It is also used to evaluate the performance of an individual utilizing a representation of cognitive and response characteristics. It gives nurses an opportunity to teach patients how to experience their feelings and explore with clients and how to bear their feelings. Binibigyan daw po ng nurse ay ng opportunity ni Hildegard Peplau, yung sa theory niya, binibigyan niya ng opportunity yung nurse para turuan yung mga pasyente kung paano nila i-express yung feelings nila. Tapos dito sa in-include niya yung nila Maslow, nila Myler, nila Sullivan, Pavlos, Adler, Simons. Yung kay Maslow, people are motivated to attain self-actualization. Self-actualization describes the desire that leads to the realization of one's full potential. Yung kay Myler naman, personality theory yun. Personality physiology is a branch that examines personality and its variation among individuals, adjustment mechanisms, psychotherapy, and principles of social learning. Yung kay Sullivan naman is the pioneer of modern psychiatry and includes cultural and social determiners to frauds of interpersonal relationship models. Sullivan's theory states that the purpose of behavior is for the patient to have his or her needs met through interpersonal interaction as well as disease or avoid anxiety. Yung kay Pavlos naman is stimulus-response model influence the principles of Myers social learning. Stimulus-response theory is a concept in physiological that refers to the belief that behavior manifests as a result of the interplay between stimulus and response. In other words, behavior cannot exist without a stimulus of some sort, at least from the perspective. Yun po, in-include po yun ni Hildegard Peplau.
Psychodynamic nursing is being able to understand one's own behavior. So that means, as a nurse, before you can give care to your client, it is very important that you are aware of yourself. You are aware of your weaknesses. You are aware of your strength. Because of course, baka mamaya kapag nag-arise, when you caring with the patient, nag-arise yung a certain situation, baka mauna ka pa doon sa patient. So dapat you need to know how to handle your patient for you to be able to help others. Identify different difficulties. Kasi if you yourself, you don't know how to identify difficulties, you don't know to handle a certain situation, it is very difficult for you to help others. And of course, to apply principles of human relations to the problems that arise at all levels of experience. Next slide. So Peplau identified 4 psychological experiences that compel destructive or constructive patient responses. So pwedeng positive or negative response. And these are the needs, frustrations, conflicts, and anxiety. Of course, di ba, kapag meron kang needs, ano ba yung needs na pinag-uusapan natin dito? It is actually healthcare needs, di ba? Healthcare needs ang kailangan because we are talking to your patient. Kailangan ni patient ng care. Kailangan ni patient ng assistant. So, na-identify mo na yung needs through your assessment. If that needs will not met, it might lead to frustrations. Di ba, kahit naman ikaw, kahit naman, for example, tulad na lang ngayon sa pag-aaral, for you to have a stable internet. So, kapag wala kang stable internet, it might lead to your frustrations. So, magiging frustrated ka. And once you are frustrated, it may also lead to conflict. Ano ba yung conflict? It could be internal. It could be external. Kapag sinabing internal, magiging moody ka na sa sarili mo. Feeling mo, naku, ganito na ako. Or kapag patient ako, hindi ko na magagawa yung mga dati kong ginagawa. Hindi ko na kaya. Wala na akong silbi. So that is conflict with your own self. And then, start ng conflict, nagiging mataray ka na sa mga tao sa paligid mo. Okay? Hindi na maganda yung mood towards your relationship with your relatives or your family. Pwedeng affected na and thus leading to anxiety. So, Peplau described the structural concepts of interpersonal process, which are the phases of helping relationship. So the first one in the phase is the orientation. So in orientation, the patient has a felt of need and expresses the desire for professional assistance. So ito yung nakaramdam si patient ng, naku, parang palaging sumasakit na yung ulo ko or nahihilo na ako. So pupunta na si patient to the clinic and then magpapa-check up na siya. And then the nurse helps the patient recognize and understand his or her problem and determine his or her needs for help. So in this phase, the nurse start now to his or her assessment. So in this phase, the relationship of the nurse and the patient started na. So the second phase is the identification. In this phase, the nurse permits exploration of feelings. Okay? So explore mo na. So you have to investigate bakit ganito yung feelings ng patient, ano yung possible factors, bakit sinabi niyang masakit ang ulo ko, at tinatanong mo na this time, ano kaya ang naging cause kung bakit? Tinitingnan mo na o nag-a-assess ka na. Tinitingnan mo na kung yung kanyang vital signs or ine-explore mo, ano po ba, what is your occupation? Okay? Anong oras ka natutulog? Or na-stress ka po ba? So, those are the things na kailangan mo i-investigate. To aid the patient in undergoing illness as an experience that reorients feelings and strengthens positive forces in the personality and provides needed satisfaction. So it involves the nurse educating the patient. It can ask the client how they learn best. So paano ka ba matututo? Dito kasi sa identification, nakita na natin yung problem, di ba? So in-investigate na natin, tapos pinag-iisipan natin kung ano ba yung mga pwede natin gawin. You have to work with the patient. Parang you have to work together. Okay? So, na-identify mo na, ito pala kung bakit ka na nahihilo, dahil pala bumababa na yung blood sugar. Okay? So, ito yung kailangan natin gawin. So, you have to work together with your patient. Okay, next slide po. And then, exploitation. The patient attempts to derive full value from what he or she offered through the relationship as he or she moves on from a dependent to independent one. So the nurse can protect new goals to achieve through personal effort and power shift from the nurse to the patient as the patient delays gratification to achieve the newly formed goals. So in this phase, the aims of the nurse is to modify the client behavior kasi malapit na kayong maghiwalay. So, na-identify naman na yung problem. For example, si patient is diabetic. So, kailangan ituro mo sa kanya yung diet therapy na dapat bawal na. Magle-less na siya ng sugar, controls the carbohydrates, or if the patient needs to take medication, so dapat alam na ni patient to. How to do that kung papaano siya uminom ng medication. So, dapat dito na ituturo mo na maging independent, mag-move on na si patient from being dependent sa'yo to being independent. Inire-ready mo siya because in the next phase, uuwi na si patient. Okay? Next slide. So, this is the last phase, dissolution, or also known as termination phase. In this phase, the patient earns the independence. So, naturuan mo na siya doon sa exploitation kung ano yung gagawin over his or her care as he or she gradually puts aside all goods, pulls, and formulates new one. This is the process that the patient frees himself or herself for identification with the nurse. Kasi doon sa identification, parang dependent pa lang si patient. Okay? It is very apparent that the experience leaves a lasting impression on the patient since illness and assuming a dependent role is a unique human experience. Next slide. So, interpersonal therapeutic process is based on the theory proposed by Peplau and particularly useful in psychiatric patients become receptive of therapy. So more on for psychiatric patients ito, no? So often referred to Peplau as psychological mothering. So it includes the following steps. So may another steps na naman. The patient is accepted unconditionally as a participant in a relationship that sacrifices needs. So, i-accept mo na siya as a person or individual with own values, with own belief. You have to give respect to the client. So, there is recognition of and response to the patient's readiness for the growth as his initiative. So, here na-recognize mo na yung need ng client and you are now planning how to respond or how to meet those needs. Power in the relationship shift to the patient as the patient is able to delay gratification and to invest in goal achievement. Next slide. So Peplau also identified the 6 nursing rules. Meron siyang 6 nursing rules. The nurse assumes several rules which empower and equip her in meeting the needs of the patient that are appropriately being used by the nurse in different situations and phases of interpersonal relations. So the first rule will be discussed by Paul Justin.
First rule of nursing. Rule of the stranger. Initial contact. The nurse and the patient are stranger to one another, and as a nurse obtained to know the patient better. She most treat him with the utmost courtesy, which include acceptance of the patient. as a person and due respect over his individuality. For example, as a nurse, kailangan natin kilalanin yung patient natin for more information about sa background niya at sa personal info ng kung anong nararamdaman niyang sakit. Next, the role of resources person. As the patient assume as dependent role, the nurse provide spec answer to his question, which include health information, advice and simple explanation of the health care. For example, kailangan natin as a patient, kailangan natin sagutin yung mga tanong nung nurse kung anong mga question ang ibibigay niya sa'yo. Kailangan mong sabihin yung totoo kung ano yung mga nararamdaman mo, kung anong pakiramdam mo, ba't ka basta yun. Next. Nicole.
The teaching role, as the interaction progresses, the nurse assumes a teaching role as she gives much importance for self-care, adding helping him understand the therapeutic plan. In assuming this role, the nurse must determine how the patient understands the subject at hand. She must develop her discussions around the interest of the patient and his ability of using the information provided. So sabi po dito, habang nagpa-progress or umuusad yung interaction ng nurse at pasyente, yung nurse is kailangan niyang paunlarin ang kanyang talakayan patungkol sa interes ng kanyang pasyente at kung ano ang kanyang kakayahan batay sa impormasyong ibinigay. So in assuming this role, kailangang matukoy ng nurse kung paano maintindihan ng pasyente yung discussion nila between the patient tapos yung sa nurse. Next slide. So sa leading roles, it involves the democratic process. The nurse helps the patient meet the task at hand through a relationship of cooperation and active participation. The nurse helping the patient to acknowledge or maunawaan yung task sa pamamagitan ng cooperation at active participation ng both sa kanila. Si Hildegard Peplau considered nursing to be a significant therapeutic interpersonal process. She defines it as a human relationship between an individual who is sick or in need of health service, and the nurse is specially educated to recognize and to respond to the need for help.
Fifth rule is the surrogate rule. This nurse rule, the patient dependency for his care gives the nurse a surrogate role or temporary caregiver. This actually creates an atmosphere wherein feelings previously felt, such as feelings towards his mother. This could be opposite and negative feelings or impact to the client. Some other relationships are reactivated and nurtured. So, feeling niya parang nanay ka niya. Baka mamaya nakadepende na siya sa'yo, kaya siya gumagaling. Dahil parang feeling niya nanay ka niya or asawa or girlfriend ka niya. Although the patient recognized that the nurse has similarities with the person whom he recalls in previous relationships, the nurse must assist the patient to make sure that his surrogate role is different and only temporary. So it's very important kapag sinabi niya, ay, para ka talagang naalala ko sa yung aking asawa, yung pagkikare niya sa akin. Ganun. Iyak na si patient kasi halimbawa na nawala na yung asawa niya or namatay na yung asawa niya or wala na, di ba? Tapos na-remember niya sa'yo. You have to acknowledge that. Yes, it may be we have similarities, but you have to remember that it is your wife and I am your nurse. And I am here to help you in your health recovery process. Next slide.
Let's proceed to counseling rules. Peplau believes that the counseling rules has the greatest importance and emphasis in nursing. This role strengthens the nurse-patient relationship as the nurse becomes a listening friend and understand family member and someone who gives sound and empathic advices. The very core of the interpersonal technique is for patient to remember and to understand the experience and how could how could be integrate into his life. Naniniwala si Peplau ang tungkulin sa pagpapayo ay may pinakamalaking kalagahan at importansya din sa pag-aalaga. Ang tungkulin ito ay nagpapatibay ng relasyon ng nurse-pasyente. Ang isang nurse ay nagiging isang kaibigang nakikinig at nagbibigay ng maayos at mariing payo. Next slide. Meta paradigm in nursing. Nursing, Peplau described nursing as a significant therapeutic interpersonal process. It functions cooperatively with others human processes that make health possible for individuals and communities. Nursing is an educative instrument and monitoring force that aims to promote forward movements of personality in the direction of creative, constructive, productive, personal, and community living. Inilarawan ni Peplau ang pag-aalaga bilang makabulang therapeutic interpersonal na proseso. Isinasad din ni Peplau ginagawang posible ang kalusugan para sa mga individual sa komunidad. Next slide. Person. Peplau defined person as a man who is an organism that lives in unstable balance of given system. Next slide. Health. Peplau consider health as a word that symbolizes movement of personality and other ongoing processes that direct the person towards creative, constructive, productive, and community living. He also gave importance to the belief that one's health to be lived, achieved, and maintain his needs must be met. Next slide. Environment. Peplau defines environment as a force outside the organism and the context of the socially approved way of living from which vital human social processes are derived, such as the norms, customs, and belief. However, this given condition that led to health always include the interpersonal process. Next slide. She died peacefully in her sleep 89 years later on March 17, 1999, in her home in Sherman Oaks, California. Okay na.
So thank you guys for listening.